I tried to remember the person I used to be, but I just couldn't do it.
To the island! To you!
And so long as I stayed here,
To the future!
I'd never find him again.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Real Time, 25 years later. This is a podcast that looks back at movies from the last quarter century, 25 years ago. I'm Kevin Foux.
And I'm Kevin Rice. And today we are talking about Danny Boyle's The Beach, a movie that seems to have been completely forgotten to time.
Yes, and we are also joined today by our great buddy and film aficionado, Zach Wigington. Zach, hey, how you doing, man?
Hello, I'm here.
You're here.
So excited. Thank you for bringing the enthusiasm. I love it.
I'm back for the Leo mania. I'm reliving that.
Absolutely. So let's just dive right into it.
The whole world is just one big theme park. We can order up our own personal adventure, processed and packaged, all the dangerous parts taken out and flushed away. Now I made a decision in the haze of infatuation. I'm gone. I'm out of here. I'm in search of something different.
The Beach centers around Leonardo DiCaprio's Richard, a transient with a sense of adventure who is currently traveling to Bangkok. One night, after having a heart-to-heart with his crazy neighbor Daffy, who lives one room over, Richard discovers that the next morning he's killed himself, but not before leaving behind a map to a mystical paradise known only as the Beach. Love triangles and drug smuggling, joining a crazy cult. Those are just three of the things this film might be about.
So directed by Danny Boyle, who at the time had just come off a really, really monumental win with Trainspotting. BAFTA, the British and Film Academy of Television and Film, or whatever it's called, actually named Trainspotting as one of the 10 best British films of all time. What does he choose for his next follow-up to Trainspotting? He buys the rights to a novel by Alex Garland called The Beach. Alex Garland, film fans of today probably know him for, writing and directing several tremendous movies from the past several years. He wrote the movie and directed Civil War from just last
What's
year.
interesting, Kevin? He's such a great writer. He actually didn't start directing until 2014. Many, many, many years after.
That's true, yeah.
I mean, obviously he's been writing scripts. He's been involved in Hollywood, but his first movie was Ex Machina. Which
Ex Machina, tremendous movie.
Zach and I know are big fans of that film. So
before he started directing, though, he collaborated several times with Danny Boyle himself. Sunshine, one of my favorite sci-fi movies.
Great
ever.
film.
I love that movie. I think people give it a lot more crap than they really need to for the third act, but that's another podcast altogether. And then, of course, 28 Days Later was Alex Garland and Danny Boyle's first collaboration. Wonderful movie that really kind of redefined zombie movies for the new millennium. And good news, they're about to collaborate again. This year is the first of a new trilogy of sequel movies for the 28 Days Later franchise.
I actually thought it was just going to be one sequel. I
Nah,
thought
it's
they were coming
it's
back.
gonna be a trilogy, yeah. So Danny
right.
Boyle is directing, I believe, the first and the third of the movies, and Alex Garland, I think, is writing all of them. So really excited about that. But I think their partnership and their collaboration kind of began with the production of The Beach. Alex Garland wrote and published the novel in 1997, where it was then it picked up.
Obviously, Leonardo DiCaprio, star of the film, he was coming off hot of Titanic. 1997, but one of the biggest movies perhaps of all time. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're in our age range, maybe a little bit younger. I mean, everyone knows Titanic. Everyone knows Leonardo. Everyone knows the, Never Let Go. Of course, he does let go and dies. But yes, he's coming off of Titanic in 97, one of the biggest stars around. And he was actually wanting a huge salary to be in American Psycho, which is a movie coming up that we might talk about eventually on this podcast. But he wanted $20 million for American Psycho, smaller budget film. didn't get it, and he ended up landing the role and in this film for better or worse. I don't know. We'll talk about that.
I think better for us as viewers, because obviously American Psycho then went to Christian Bale, and
Right.
that's just an iconic performance. Could Leo have
Absolutely.
done that? Absolutely, I think he could have. I think he would have done a really good job. But I would in the cinematic what if universe, I would never trade Christian Bale in American Psycho for I think.
No, and I can't wait to talk about that film. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's gonna be good.
Yeah.
So, did you look up and see who was originally going to play the lead in The Beach, though?
Oh no.
It was going to be Ewan McGregor.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
that was
Yeah.
who it originally was going to go for, but the studio wanted a bigger name. Obviously, Titanic, it was everywhere at the time. So the studio really wanted to push for to make it an American, because in the book it's a British character. Danny Boyle, obviously just coming off of Trainspotting with Ewan McGregor, had a really good relationship there. Studio didn't want McGregor, and it kind of led to a bit of a falling out between Ewan McGregor and Danny Boyle. It kind of soured their relationship for several years. They've since reconciled. They made a sequel to Trainspotting together, so they're good now. But kind of an interesting thought as to how would Ewan McGregor would have done in this. Again, I think he would have nailed the part.
I think you would have done pretty well.
Yeah, pretty well. But I don't think the movie would have been, to the studio's decision-making credit, probably as near of a financial success as it was, which was a modest success. Speaking of, the movie was made on a $50 million budget. So a good mid-size, mid-size budget. Like they don't really make those anymore. Now everything is kind of $150 million or more. And Hollywood doesn't do anything different these days. So it did go on to gross $144 million worldwide. So pretty decent success.
All right.
The film was shot on location in Thailand, in a couple different locations. And this is notable because apparently there were lawsuits filed against the movie studio because they tore up the beaches that they shot on. These are like historical Thai
no.
beaches, and they kind of wrecked the place.
They were just like the hippies in the movie.
Yeah, exactly. And it took years and years and years for the beaches to actually be reclaimed back into their natural state.
Wow. Jeez.
Not great, Danny Boyle. So upon release, critical reception, not that great. Right now, Rotten Tomatoes has the critic score at 21%. Obviously, pretty rotten. The audience meter, though, the popcorn meter, is 57%. So a little bit better. Still not considered fresh, but a little bit better. The late great Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times, he says, "Watching The Beach is like experiencing a script conference where only sequences are discussed, never the whole film. What's it about anyway?" So Zach, Kev, that kind of, I think, speaks to one of the biggest problems I have with the movie was that it was pretty unfocused as to what it was trying to do. So thoughts about that?
Yeah, no, that seems like pretty like spot on criticism. It was like kinds where I was like engaged with what was going on. And then there's other like kind of WTF is going on sort of thing. Especially it's just like I don't know, it's hard to find like a core that's like, oh, you're kind of sitting there going like, okay, what's this movie trying to critique?
Yeah.
Is there a socio-political thing undergoing it? And it never seems to arrive there.
Yeah.
There's like inklings of things, and you like, oh, maybe that's going to go somewhere, and it doesn't really. Love triangles peter out. There's all sorts of stuff that you're just like, at the end of it, just kind of left wanting, I guess. And there's a feeling of there's something there. There's something in it just was never discovered.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I thought there was a really good premise to the film, and I was actually really enjoying it. I haven't rewatched this. I watched it a long time ago. I don't even remember when. So this rewatch made it fresh in my mind, and I was actually like, oh yeah, this is a really good movie. I'm enjoying this. And then I got to that third act, and I'm like, nothing is coming together.
Right.
Like nothing, all of these things are, it's like Zach said, the love triangle is going one way, and now he's a soldier, and now they're killing kids, and like, and the cult isn't doing anything. The cult is just sitting there on the beach. And so I don't know. I feel like maybe if you could have focused this film down on a few of the core characters, like when they get to the beach, and kind of focus it maybe around the cult leader, or maybe around the relationships of the actual characters a little bit more, you would have a stronger film. But this thing just kind of, it just completely unravels, and then it just It's kind of like you're the Daffy character experiencing his psychosis. Like, what is happening?
Lisa Schwartzbaum of Entertainment Weekly says, structured for an audience more familiar with MTV's Road Rules than with Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. And I find, calling out Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness pretty interesting there, because the big, pop culture reference that the movie itself makes, and then the movie really, really tries to be, is Apocalypse Now. They show the movie Apocalypse Now inside of the beach. And then the whole third act where Leo inexplicably kind of becomes this one-man army. He's so clearly channeling Martin Sheen in Apocalypse Now that whole aspect of it just really was baffling to me, because it just kind of didn't really feel like it came organically out of where the story was going or where it needed to go or where it wanted to go. And it really just kind of felt like Hollywood bullshittery. And I haven't read the book, so I don't know if that's how the book ends as well. I started it, but I haven't had time to finish it. So I don't know. That might be a problem that's just in the narrative already, but maybe it's just handled differently and better in the book. I'm not sure. But yeah, the whole MTV's Road Rules thing, that's another big issue with the film I have, is that it just feels very overly hyperkinetic in a lot of ways. There's a lot of style over substance problems. Danny Boyle is very much a stylist when it comes to direction, and I think that's one of his strengths. Look at what he does with Slumdog Millionaire or what he did with Trainspotting, where there's so much visual flair that enhances the storytelling. Whereas in this, it really kind of felt like a crutch, where nothing going on narratively or with the characters is all that interesting. So let me kind of put in, like this one sequence where they're stargazing and it has this long exposure, Final Cut Pro effect added to it. Or we'll probably talk about it more later, but the video game sequence was just a baffling choice.
Absolutely.
I was playing my own game now, and I had absolutely no reason to go back.
That damn near made me turn off the movie, just to kind of recollect myself and gather the energy to soldier through.
Yeah, there was those moments of like tonal whiplash where you're just kind of like, okay, like does it want to be serious? Is it trying to? Is it he's sneaking into this like shack with like this the farmers sleeping and whatnot?
Yeah.
And he's messing with their guns and stuff. And you're like, is it supposed to be like some sort of parody thing? Are we supposed to be like tense here?
Yeah.
The same with like the sharks and whatnot. And it's just like these moments there you're like, oh, this is like really gruesome and
Yeah.
disturbing and like really showing everything. And then it has this like bizarre video game sequence. You're like,
Yep.
it just doesn't like hold together to anything. It's like, what's going on?
There's a point where Leonardo's character Richard is on the beach with Francesca, and they're doing the whole stargazing thing Kevin was just talking about. And she calls him out on his pretentious bullshit. She says, that's pretentious American bullshit.
This is just the kind of pretentious bullshit the Americans always say to French girls, so they can sleep with them.
God, sorry. Thought I was doing pretty good.
And I was like, is this a meta reference to what Danny Boyle is doing? Are you doing pretentious shit just to do it?
Kind of encapsulates the whole movie in that one line unintentionally.
Exactly.
But then they don't do anything with it. You're like, well, it's self-aware. And then you're like, later on, you're like, well, was it? Is it ever?
Right. Here's my favorite Letterboxd pull quote that I found. This is from Amaya. She gave it 2 stars. She says, when you expect Castaway, but you get The Wicker Man with a teenage girl's iPod soundtrack.
All right.
That's
very specific.
I thought that was pretty good. I will say, the soundtrack, it's kind of okay. There's a Moby song in there that's pretty good. It's kind of
this
a couple
poorly of me, but I really enjoyed the soundtrack.
Yeah, there you go.
That's probably one of my favorite parts of the film. Honestly, I was like, oh, I'm digging this. This is 2000s for sure. It's early 2000s.
It's a very like time capsule sort of thing. But I think those elements, like Kevin had mentioned, like the stylistic virtues of Danny Boyle's like directing, and like, I think the music selection does like add to the film in some way. It doesn't. None of those things elevate.
General thoughts, first of all, then we'll kind of dig a little deeper into it. Zach, you're our guest, so I'll let you go first. So overall, what did you think of The Beach?
Kind of like Kevin mentioned earlier, like, it was kind of engaged in the beginning before it kind of got everywhere. It was interesting that they got to the beach so early on. I expected it to be a little bit like later, play more into like, oh, this is like, no one's discovered this sort of thing. And then they find it like pretty easily.
Yeah.
I guess they had a map, but it's still kind of bizarre. And I think that, like, beginning in the second act, you just kind of start losing a bit of interest. You're like, where's this going? They have like some fake outs and whatnot. And you're like, I don't know. Like you said, it's hard to feel, oh, it's supposed to be like tense. Is this like a thriller sort of thing going on? I don't know. So you never really are able to like settle in. So yeah, I just was left wanting at the end, where just like, nothing much seemed to happen that I cared about.
Yeah.
And you're just reeling from these video game moments or the talking shark and all these effects and whatnot. And it was a big miss for me.
Yeah. Kev, what do you think?
I really want to like this. I I was so into it for the first 2 acts, and it's something that, like, I love pretentious filmmaking. I love the ridiculous performances, and just like, I really thought Leo was having the time of his life. I think when he was making this, he probably really enjoyed making it, and it seems like he was really trying to differentiate himself from, his Titanic character that he had just come off of, and I think he did a good job doing that. But the film itself, even for someone like me that just loves this bizarre stuff, loves meta references about pretentious bullshit, it doesn't add up in the end. It doesn't go anywhere. There's too many plot threads. One of them in particular, he ends up sleeping with Tilda Swinton's character. She's like the leader of the cult, and he's had this whole like antagonistic thing with her boyfriend like the entire time. The dude's not even in the last act. You don't even see him again. He doesn't even pop in. It's like he's, before he leaves for the trip, he's grabbing his balls, and there's all this tension, and he's gonna beat him up, and then dude just disappears from the movie, and it doesn't matter. And then it's a video game sequence, and it's like, focus on your core characters. You can make good pretentious filmmaking, but you still have to make the movie like actually add up to something or say something. And the final act killed it for me, unfortunately.
I'm gonna go a little bit further and say that this movie just fucking sucks.
I disagree.
Which is, really kind of a surprise for me, because I watched it when it came out back in 2000, and I remember enjoying it. And I guess maybe, I don't know, maybe I've just changed that much as a person in the 25 subsequent years. But I really thought this was quite poor, in so many ways. And it's a really rare miss for Danny Boyle. Danny Boyle is one of my favorite filmmakers, and I probably need to reevaluate my stance on Danny Boyle, frankly, in the pantheon of filmmakers, because man, he put out a stinker here. He really did. Obviously, no director's perfect. Everybody has bad days. He just happened to have a really, big one that cost $50 million of a movie studio to make. This movie is just entirely unfocused. It can't decide what it wants to be moment to moment. Does it want to be a romantic drama? Does it want to be a man versus nature adventure movie? Does it want to be a one-man army, post-apocalypse now thing? And it doesn't really give any of that the credit or the attention that it really needs to work. It just instead is shifting from one thing to the next, and the whole thing just comes across as silly and frankly a little boring. And what I've always said about movies, especially bad movies, is it's okay for a movie to be bad. It's not okay for a movie to be boring. And this fell directly into the boring level for me, where I was checking the time, how much of this is left, pausing it just on the streamer just so I could see how much is left multiple times. Not a good viewing experience for me. So bit of a bummer. I was really disappointed by it. So what do you think? Are there any standout moments that really worked for you or didn't work for you? So kind of a best of, worst of. So Zach, any standout moments?
Best of moment is hard to think of. I think I'm like inclined to kind of agree with like folks in a little bit, where it's like I did enjoy kind of Leo really kind of getting into the role, and even like the silly aspects of it. I guess it's enjoyable kind of like watching that. But some of just like the bizarre, like the video game sequence, it's like I get that counts as the high mark just because of like, in a way, you're just like, what is this? Why is this? It's such like a big swing that I kind of appreciate on a certain level. Um, everything else, I'm just kind of like, there's a lot of like weak moments. It's kind of in that era where CG and 3D effects and all that stuff and just editing effects aren't quite there. So you can kind of get an idea of like, oh, what these directors are doing, but they can't quite execute it. And looking back, for sure, maybe at the time people gave it a little bit more leeway, but looking back now, you're like, it doesn't have that like emotional weight that they're trying to get across. It doesn't like hit like that. Yeah, and also I did find the kind of gorish aspects interesting as well, even though they did feel a little out of place with like you said, there's like this, does it want to be a romance? Does it want to be an adventure thing? And it's like, oh, this is like kind of gruesome. And I almost kind of feel like they leaned into that a little bit more. You would have been like, okay, cool. I kind of get the sense of this is what this is like built around. It's kind of like war aspect of it. But yeah, definitely more misses than hits.
I think there are interesting themes that they started hinting at that they just didn't really follow through with, and that to me is one of the big misses. I guess one of the more obvious themes is colonialization. Here's a commune of mostly white Europeans who have infiltrated this Thai beach and have set up shop there, and there's playing at hints of a conflict between the locals. I really would have liked to have seen more done with that, kind of dive deeper into that aspect, instead of, the weird romantic love triangle that goes nowhere.
Honestly, I have a lot of standout moments. I really think the first part of this film is cool. I enjoyed it. I really like that young guy just goes off on his own. What can I see? What can I get into? That whole like random sense of adventure that you don't. I mean, I think it was a lot easier to do that in the year 2000. Obviously, traveling was a lot easier. So I don't know. The first part of the film I was really digging. I actually really enjoyed it when Daffy showed up, and it's like, whoa, what is happening? Like, what kind of adventure is this going to be? Like, he finds him dead. He's got a secret map. It could lead to so many different cool possibilities. Honestly, I think any of the things that Danny Boyle was working on, the love triangle, the cult, or the Islanders, the guys that are like drug runners, any three of the like all of those plots could have been interesting if he had just focused in on them and made a movie about one of those things. But instead he keeps just cutting them down, and it completely just falls apart later. But yeah, it actually had a decent amount of standouts. It had more standouts to me personally than it does failures, but at the end of the movie itself is a failure.
I do need to, you mentioned Daffy. That's played by the great Robert Carlyle. Fantastic character actor, has worked with Danny Boyle several times. He's really great in this. He's only in a couple scenes, really just that beginning, and then a bizarre dream sequence later in the movie.
The big chunky Charlie's eating up the whole world! And not on the beach! Not on the street!
So shout out to Robert Carlyle. He's great. And
It was good.
Tilda Swinton.
Yes.
Talk briefly about Tilda Swinton. She's always great. And even though she wasn't really given a lot to do here, she did have a couple of big standout moments when she confronts the drug runner at the end, when she's holding the gun to Leo. I thought that whole sequence was really good for her.
This is our home too. This is our house. We built it with our own hands, and we are not leaving.
Always great to see her, and she's always brings such a wonderful, magnetic, ethereal presence to something that elevates whatever she's in. So good job, Tilda. Favorite scene? Anybody have a favorite scene? I have one, but it's not for a good reason.
Oh, well, go ahead and tell us.
Okay. So this is the scene and really the moment where I had the biggest reaction. and it wasn't necessarily a great reaction, but it's when they're in the lagoon. Leo is out there swimming alone. He's fishing, and all of a sudden, everybody at the beach is screaming, "Hey, you need to come back in. You're in danger. You need to come back in." There's a shark, and it's this whole big tension-filled moment where we're building up and building up. We see the shark fin in the water. He's gonna be in danger. He's gonna get attacked, and it's this really, really tense moment. And finally, the tension breaks when he goes underwater and he sees the shark, and it's this tiny little I mean, I'm sure it's very realistic to, any baby shark is probably just as dangerous as anybody else, but that really, really felt like just a kind of an unintentional funny moment to me.
It's a really weird fucking movie,
It
man.
really is, especially because he ends up, fist fighting the shark. Which is great. But that moment to me kind of encapsulated the whole film, which is that there's this build up to stuff that then just gets completely deflated by reality of what's going on. So I just really kind of wanted to, that's my big standout moment, because I literally had to pause the movie. I was laughing so hard at the movie, not with the movie, is the problem. So any favorite scenes for you guys?
Just early on, I liked the conversation between Daffy and him.
It was a beach. You understand? The beach. It's too beautiful, too much input, too much sensation. I tried to keep it under control, but it just keeps spilling out.
That kind of bought me in for a while before everything else started to fall apart. But I just thought it was this interesting exchange. I thought it was shot well. I was just kind of engaging in the moment, and then everything else. Even if I was engaged in that very moment, then it just doesn't amount to anything. And I thought the Daffy angle was maybe like the most interesting plot line in the whole thing.
Where are you at on Danny Boyle?
Danny Boyle, I honestly, I'm a pretty, I'm not gonna say I'm the biggest fan, but I do like his work. I think he's a pretty great director. I think he has more hits than misses. And it's interesting because, we talk about a legacy check on this podcast, and maybe we should do that now. I don't think the beach itself really has much of a lasting legacy. I think if you bring up the beach, people might say, what? Maybe remember Leonardo DiCaprio's in it, maybe. So the film itself, not a legacy. As far as one of Danny Boyle's early works, it's very interesting to see where his legacy has gone since this movie. And I think it's only gone up.
It certainly has only gone up. To me, this really feels like a bump in the road for Danny Boyle, because I mean, Shallow Grave was his debut, great movie. Trainspotting was his follow-up, amazing movie. One in the argument to say this is probably one of the best drug dramas ever made, Trainspotting was. And then there's The Beach, and it really feels like a step back. And I think had Danny Boyle maybe not played his cards quite as right as he did, this could have derailed his career. Even though it was a financial success, but I mean, just quality wise, it's a kind of a nosedive off of Trainspotting. Now he goes on from this to make, Sunshine, 28 Days Later, some all-time bangers, frankly, Slumdog Millionaire. One of my favorite things he's ever done is he was the creative director for the 2012 London Olympics opening ceremonies. And I know that sounds like such a weird departure, but he brought such a level of artistry and just sophistication to it that was kind of unparalleled and unmatched. That still stands to this day as one of the best live artistic events I've ever seen.
That's really cool.
Which is really cool. So yeah, Danny Boyle, Zach, what are your thoughts on him?
I'm not too well versed in a lot of his stuff, honestly. The stuff I have seen, like you had mentioned earlier, where it's like I do appreciate the stylistic bent he has on things, and kind of middle on the road on him. But from what I've seen, I've enjoyed for the most part.
Yeah.
This is probably the most where I've just been like, yeah. But I don't put this film doesn't feel like a Danny Boyle issue to me. It feels like a studio issue more than anything else. Because I don't know. I like the direction generally. It's just the narrative fell apart.
Yeah. Overall, it's shot really well. Cinematographer did a really good job.
It looks very nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's some good editing choices that are made. And again, we kind of spoke about some of them earlier that kind of dip more into the style over substance editing choices, but still, it's interesting, at least. It's trying to do something artistic. Um,
What was a shot that looked like a drone shot?
I rewinded and watched the shot a couple times because so they're on the river and the camera starts real close to them, real low to the ground, and pulls out over the cliff. Of course, obviously today you would do that with a drone. So I was trying to think, like, okay, how would they have done that? Filming it in 1999. Was it a helicopter? Was it a really elaborate, extended crane thing? But whatever that was really cool. So yeah, well done, cinematographer, for pulling that one off.
There was one more thing I wanted to bring up, just going back to legacy of the film, and I did want to talk about Leonardo DiCaprio. Obviously, much younger when he made this film, 25 years younger. I just thought it would be interesting to say, was this a step in the right direction for his career? Because obviously he was the big heartthrob. He was known for Titanic. He was known for being very good looking, very leading man, romantic. And nowadays he's kind of all over the place. He plays a very wide variety of characters, and he's very well regarded. I think most people would say he's probably one of the best actors around right now.
Certainly of his generation, absolutely.
Of his generation, yeah. So I'm just wondering, what do you guys think? Do you think this was kind of a good veering off point for him, or do you think it's kind of a miss, and he still managed to write his career anyway?
I honestly, I think that after Titanic, he could have done anything and still landed out on top, because that was such an enormous success, and talk about owning the zeitgeist for years. It's kind of trite to say, oh, he's king of the world, because that's what he says in Titanic. But I mean, honestly, he could have done whatever he wanted. After The Beach comes out in 2000, he follows that up with Gangs of New York,
Right.
with Martin
Excellent.
Scorsese. Catch Me If You Can with Steven Spielberg. Then he's just fully on his Scorsese kick with The Aviator, Departed, and Shutter Island shortly after.
Right.
So yeah, I think this is a bump in the road for him, kind of just a glitch in the matrix of Leonardo DiCaprio's career, I guess, because before this was great, not only Titanic, but he had really breakout roles in Romeo and Juliet. He's really cool in The Basketball Diaries, which is a really underrated movie that more people need to watch. So yeah, I think he's clearly one of the best around. Not only for just kind of just pop culture clout, but he's just a tremendous actor. He really is. I think
Absolutely.
few actors throw themselves as much into a role as he does, especially latter stage DiCaprio, post heartthrob DiCaprio after he gained some weight. So,
Right.
yeah. Zach, thoughts on Leo?
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of like a generational talent, and I don't think even if he chose something that was like, in my opinion, like worse than this film, I don't think it would have like derailed his career or anything. It's just, he's got that cachet, especially coming off of Titanic. Like you said, he could do pretty much anything. And, he could have had a string of bad things, and I think he would have still come out on top. And I think this was a good point for him to like transition maybe from that, like, oh, I don't necessarily want to be typecast as this like heartthrob character, and I want to kind of expand and do different things. And I think that idea is a good step. And this, even if this wasn't the best movie to do so.
Yeah, he seems to have kind of slowed down a bit, in recent years. He's only made, in the past 5 years, he's only made 2 movies. Killers of the Flower Moon in 2023, and Don't Look Up in 2021. I guess if you want to count 2019 we'll count that one as well. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Don't Look Up was a miss for me, personally, but that wasn't Leo's fault. That was just the movie. I thought was pretty rank. But obviously he won his Oscar for The Revenant 10 years ago now in 2015.
Wow.
God, time flies. So he was chasing that Oscar for how long? Should have won it.
years.
Should have won it for The Wolf of Wall Street, but he didn't. Got it for
I'd
The Revenant
argue,
instead.
and this is controversial, I'd argue you should have won it for Aviator as well, but
Yeah,
you know.
honestly, yeah, he was really terrific in that. Okay, so officially, Kevin, we kind of already talked about it a little bit, but legacy check. So Zachary, here's the options: overrated, underrated, properly remembered. What do you think?
I don't think it's really remembered at all, which I think is the right spot.
Right.
It's not a standout or anything. It's kind of an interesting nugget in both Danny Boyle's and Leonardo DiCaprio's career. So yeah, I guess if you were like doing a deep dive into their work, it might be an interesting thing to check out. But other than that, it seems kind of properly where it needs to be in the cultural zeitgeist.
Yeah, when I went into this, when I made the list of movies we're going to talk about, I was like, you know what? I bet this is going to be a forgotten gem.
I thought so too.
No, I think this is, like you say, it is entirely left in the history books, and it's just better there. Let's just move on and pretend this never happened. So, Kev, overrated, underrated, properly rated?
I'll give a bit of a controversial statement. I think if you're a film buff, it's underrated. I think that it's fun to see what Danny Boyle, what Alex Garland, and what Leonardo DiCaprio were up to 25 years ago and kind of where that leads them today. And they're all still very successful, which is pretty interesting. The film's a miss. It's not a good film. Doesn't come together in the third act. But, I think it should be a little bit more remembered than nothing at all. And I think right now it's just nothing at all.
Yeah, I mean, you don't hear, nobody talks about this. It never comes up in, Reddit threads or internet discussions or any of that stuff. So for better or worse, it is lost to time.
All right, that was it this week for Real Time 25 Years Later. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We're in all the podcast places, Spotify, Apple, all that. We are also on YouTube with video and video clips by our wonderful editor, Kevin Rice. Thank you for making the show look so great. And Zachary, thank you so much for joining us today, man, to talk about the beach.
Well, thanks for having me.
And thank you for watching. Be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more Real Time. Next week, we're taking a look at a Vin Diesel twofer with Boiler Room and Pitch Black. See you next time.